Hi, good afternoon. This is Grace Walker. I'm the social media coordinator for CAFE, Cultural Academy for Excellence. We have been doing a series of videos, discussions actually, with renowned experts in various fields over the past few weeks so that we can bring our audiences information, resources, expertise, especially during this time that we have been social distanced. So today we have the privilege, the pleasure, the honor to introduce to you Dr. Barbara Hutchinson. I'm just going to introduce you by telling you a little bit about Dr. Hutchinson. Dr. Hutchinson is a renowned cardiologist who is the president of Chesapeake Cardiac Care, an adult cardiology practice headquartered in Annapolis, Maryland. Patients from all over the world seek her out. They'll get on a plane in the morning, have an appointment with her that includes expedited 1 day test results, and then get back on a plane later that evening. Now, I can't even elaborate or speak to that. So let's introduce you to Dr. Hutchinson. Barbara, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule today to be on this forum. So give us some uh, background knowledge on one, how you have been associated with Cafe, and tell us a little bit about yourself. And as we go on, we will talk about your practice and share what you can bring to the audience.
Sure. I was first introduced to cafe actually by my cousin, Dr. Gerard Davidson, who
Okay.
who served on the board. And I would tell you he is very passionate about the mission of cafe and just how cafe over the lives have invested in young people's lives. And so every opportunity he gets, he tells me about what's going on. And I've been to most, I would say, most of cafe's concerts. They have their special presentation, whether it's at Christmas time or during the year. And over the years, I too have grown to really admire the mission of Cafe in terms of investing in young people. Because
Absolutely.
sometimes as adults, we forget that we were once young and someone invested in our lives. That's why we're able to do the things that we're able to do now. So
Correct.
I'm very passionate about the mission of Cafe and how it engages young people and young people of different ethnic backgrounds and how they're able to meet those special needs.
I have to share with you a little bit of insight. So, Dr. Davidson, we were able recently to do one of our videos, but we're going to have a retake because we didn't quite have the accurate lighting to make sure that we got the presentation. It was a great video, but Dr. Davidson again has been a stellar example of what cafes body of I would say professionals include, and so I'm looking forward to his further follow-up interview in the very near future.
Sure. And one thing I forgot to share with you, I've had the honor of being invited to be on the board of Cafe. And so I'm looking forward to that myself in the coming months.
Wonderful, wonderful. Again, it speaks to more than just not only the caliber of professionals and interests that leadership with Cafe has established, but it speaks to more than the visionary
Yes.
in the leadership, especially Lord Green. So I know that it would be a welcome asset and to the board when you have actually fully vested in it.
Sure.
So
And
so today,
I would be remiss if I did not also mention that Lorna is a dear cousin of mine too. And so I am more than anxious to start supporting Cafe because I believe cafe is one of the hidden secrets of the DMV area. And I think more people need to know what we have been doing in the background for these young people.
It's amazing. Just and I've been on board, just on board as one of the um, supporting talents with Cafe over the last 3 years, more so. And in those 3 years, the um, overwhelming
Mhm.
um, information, talents, and for me, the excitement of seeing the graduates who have gone on to also become doctors,
Yes.
um, scholars in various fields, it is really impressive. And it's not just talking about it. This is just the intellectual, the creative capital that Cafe has um, birthed
Yeah.
is just phenomenal, and bringing the culture of music to our worldwide audiences
Sure.
through the music of Steel Pan.
Yeah.
Again, has been such a phenomenal exposure for so many people in this local area. And it is a hidden secret,
It
and
is.
it is going to blossom and flourish
Sure.
exponentially as
Mhm.
we go forward. So
Yeah.
please tell us and share with us today um, about the work that you are doing in your um, specialties, how it has been impacted during this time, and as you are uh, continuing, as you indicated to me just offline, your multiple Zoom sessions during a given day. I'm sure that involves a lot of training, education. Um, how have you been able to um, manage your practice and continue to develop it through this process of a pandemic?
Sure. So I'll go back to pre-COVID
Yes.
because pre-COVID, I had a big cardiovascular practice in Annapolis.
Yeah.
I'm also one of the only physicians in Maryland that's double boarded in cardiovascular medicine and sleep medicine. So I do both. So I take care of people with sleep problems, especially those sleep problems that can affect the cardiovascular system, mainly sleep apnea. So prior to COVID, we were very busy on any one day. And once the pandemic was announced, I realized that in the next few weeks, that sooner or later, patients would not be able to come into the office. So
Hmm.
immediately I pivoted to telemedicine,
Right.
where I could see the patients via a video system.
Hmm.
So essentially, we have not stopped since COVID. We've
Hmm.
continued to see patients through the pandemic, but instead of seeing patients in person, we were seeing them via video chat, and later, for some people who did not have the technology, by telephone.
Mm.
But it's interesting that there's still a lot of people that are somewhat uh, suspicious, I would say, I would use the word, of technology. And so they have not totally embraced the whole idea of telemedicine. And
Hmm.
so when offered telemedicine, they would say, oh no, I'll wait until this is over and I'll see the doctor. And I'll address that later because this could lead to other problems downstream that we have to deal with.
Yeah.
But for the most part, most people have embraced it. And my best story was my 93-year-old who I dialed up on video chat, and she was on in less than a minute. Whereas some of my 33-year-old, they're fumbling, they don't know which button to check. She was on and ready.
Yeah.
And so it has really enabled me to see how sometimes the consumer can pivot to, because some people have really embraced this. And the other thing I found out is many people have smartphones that they have received from their children for
Right.
as gifts, and they never turned all the bells and whistles on. And this pandemic has caused them to turn all the bells and whistles on, the two main ones, the camera and the audio, because
Right.
that is what enables us to see each other. So it's been good in both directions. But like I said, from a practice point of view, we have seen a decrease in the number of patients that we normally see. But I anticipate that as we slowly get back into seeing people live, that would improve. But in terms of going forward, I would say this. I think telemedicine is here to stay.
Mm.
So those people who have not embraced it, you would be left behind. The one thing I would say to everyone listening, that if you have a smartphone, you should turn all the bells and whistles on so that you would be able to access your provider in the future going forward.
What would you say to, and again, I don't want to make this into what perhaps my own personal um, philosophy might be. What would you say to our audience, especially to those who are experiencing this pandemic and now we have to transition into learning new tools, particularly our electronics, but also those who have been impacted by the social distancing and the not knowing and what could happen next. What would your suggestions be, coming again from a practice, um, an informed physician
Mhm.
physician's perspective?
Right. So even after the practice is open, people they would still be given the option of coming in person or seen via video. So what I would say to those people that are not comfortable, because I think it's important for you to feel comfortable when you leave the home, because there's
Hmm.
still some people that are really scared. Even if
Hmm.
you're scared and you need to stay home, you can still be seen. Just be upfront with your provider and telling them, I'm not quite comfortable coming in now. Can I continue to have video visits
Yes.
until I feel safe? Because it's important to feel comfortable. But on the other hand, also know that before you, for my practice, before I can open, there's certain checklist, that's a certain checklist that I have in place to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that it's not just going to be safe for my employees, but it's also going to be safe for the clients that are coming into the practice. So social distancing, the way the office is going to be set up, there'll still be distancing, hand sanitizing, and even the flow to avoid you being too close to people. So they should also be reassured that most practices are going to be doing this. So it's not going to be business as usual. There are certain things that's going to be different. In some cases, some people may not be waiting in waiting rooms. They may be waiting in their cars until they are called into the practice. And even when you are called in, there's certain testing, apart from the questions that you'd be asked, there's certain preliminary things that's going to be checked. Do you have a temperature? And they would ask you again if you've been exposed or if you have a cough, all those things. And they should expect all these things going forward.
So let me ask you this, because the COVID pandemic has pretty much, um, I would say, narrowed how we individually interact as well socially now, and coming forward with how we're going to interact with our health practitioners. For kids, how they're going to be interacting
At
in their
school.
school environments.
Mhm.
Um, what would be the best efforts on our parts to understand the new dynamic of social um, relationshiping? Uh,
Sure. And this is very important because I think so many questions are in the air. You know, we talk about, is it going to come back in the fall? what's going to happen now with everything that's going around us this week with all these crowds,
Yes.
what's going to happen. But I think several things to keep in mind. Even when you go out now and you get back into society, the masks are going to be around for a while. So we need to get used to that, wearing a mask. That's number one. In terms of hand sanitizing, that should have been part of our milieu before. But
Yes.
now we just have to make sure it's ingrained in us, making sure we hand sanitize. And now it's called, the word that you'd be hearing a lot now is what we call contactless. So even hand sanitizers, there are two different types. You can just put your hand and it squirts, or you could pump and it squirts. In one case, you have to touch it. In the other case, you don't. So everything now would be more touchless. Even deliveries, they talk about contactless deliveries. That's not going to go away. And I think until we have a vaccine, it would be safe to continue to wear a mask, continue to do social distancing as much as possible. Try to avoid large crowds because you don't know who in that crowd has been exposed or not exposed, not wearing a mask, wearing a mask. So just be careful going forward.
With again, um, there is a fair criteria. There is the notion of, again, I was speaking with one of our professionals yesterday about the mental health aspect of this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think my family might think I'm a little bit wayward in my behaviors sometimes because I'm not quarantine pro. I just begin to feel very stifled. And
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that perhaps this is not just perhaps me as an individual, but many people may be experiencing the suffocation of
Sure,
quarantining. So again,
absolutely.
how would we um, how would we understand, again, from your perspective, share with us, how do we understand the urgency and the necessity of um, using, safe practice?
Yes. It's very interesting that since this pandemic, I have been able to connect with people from 40 years, from 30 years.
Yeah.
And it's because of technology. But I think it's real. First of all, this pandemic has given some of us time that we thought we never had.
True.
So we've been able to do things that we had on a list for 20 years that we wanted to get to that we never got to. But at the same time, we cannot ignore the fact that the pandemic has brought stress to others. And not everyone can find things to do at home. Some people, like you say, feel claustrophobic. They just like to get out there and be on the move. So for them, it's very isolating. And that isolation can bring depression. So one of the things that we have to be sensitive to is reaching out from time to time. I haven't heard or I haven't seen, now you have Zoom, now you have FaceTime, just reaching out to people, especially those people who live alone or those people who may be single, just reaching out, making sure that they're okay, checking in, because it's amazing how depression and increase in not just suicide, but domestic abuse is
Mhm.
high during this period of time, just because sometimes so many people in one location at a
Confined.
time,
Mhm.
confined, that can bring other problems. So I'm glad for technology, but at the same time, I think we could also take the initiative to reach out to people who we've not been able to talk to or see in a while.
So tell us also, what are some of the, um, in terms of your practice, what are some of the symptoms that we should be cognizant of that are indicators of you need to have this checked, or you need to make an appointment with your cardiologist, or this is more than just let me just use an example, a recurring swollen area of your body.
Sure.
What are you seeing and are suggesting are some of those indicators that we need to be aware of and pay attention to?
Good. First of all, I would say we should all know our numbers. And there are certain numbers we should know. One, we should know what your blood pressure is and have it in our mind. We should know our weight, because if you are over a BMI of 25, that's not good. So, and if you're over 30 or 40 BMI, that's getting into the obese range. So know what your blood pressure is, know what your weight is, know what your blood sugar is, know what your cholesterol numbers are, just total cholesterol numbers. But what it is, it's broken down into the good, the bad, and the ugly. What's your LDL, which is the good? Your HDL, HDL is the good, the LDL is the bad, and I like to call the triglyceride the ugly. So know your numbers, and if any of those numbers are off consistently, even if others are ignoring it, you may sometimes need to ask your provider, can I see a doctor? Because I notice I'm on 4 medications and my blood pressure is still high. There may be something that's missing or not addressed that'll contributor of that high blood pressure. So that's the first thing. And the other thing that I always address, the other group that I always address are women.
Mhm.
Because like you know, we do 50 things at a time. We take care of everybody else except ourselves. And sometimes we could miss signs simply because we don't always present the same way like men present. So we may be having signs and you're just tired all the time, you're short of breath, or they say, oh, it's because you're overweight, you have a headache, so many different things. And I always say to women, if you have a particular symptom that you have, especially every time you exert yourself, you need to look into it, whether it's shortness of breath, whether it's fatigue, whether it's chest pain, whether it's belly pain, because it's so important. The signs of a heart attack present differently in women. And I can't tell you how many women I've met who said, oh, I've had acid reflux for 10 years, and it's actually their heart
Tell
that,
us about.
that presented as GI symptoms.
Mm,
So knowing your numbers and being sensitive to your bodies.
mhm.
It's important to exercise. It's important to not smoke. All these basic things I think we should take care of on a daily basis. Watch the salt intake. And another thing is know your family history, because you can't give away your genes. Your mom and dad had high blood pressure, had diabetes. It's important for you to start watching those things because your genes came from mom and dad. And it's
Mm.
not because mom and dad had those things, it necessarily means you will get it, because you can intervene early to prevent it. So if you know there's a propensity for high blood pressure in your family, stay away from the salt shaker. Start watching your salt, start exercising, and start getting in tune and knowing your blood pressure numbers from an early age.
Amazing. Often we find in our communities, and again, with reference to our communities who may not have access to some of the advanced information that may be out in the community, but not immediately available. Would you say to, again, our audience, who should we how should we, not who should we, how do we address and assist and support, especially those in our community who may not um, know that this information is available and how to access it?
Yes. You know, in most of the counties in Maryland, you can have access to healthcare and education, and a lot of people don't know that. Most of the counties just call up and find out this. In some cases, they're free clinics where physicians like myself donate their service. And
Yes.
so in the different, depending on which county you live in, you can call up to find out where such clinics are. And usually at these clinics, you can have access to providers and access to education that would educate you not just along the lines of nutrition, but if you're diabetic, helping you learn the foods that you need to eat, how to shop when you go to the grocery store, what are some of the things to look at. Because one of the things that I've found out more and more, that people are not aware of the hidden salt in items.
Mm.
So you would say, you need to watch the salt. I said, really? So they literally just think of regular salt and not realize that salt is in a lot of processed foods. You know, when you buy turkey, when you buy ham, all those processed meats or things in a can, there's a lot of salt. There's also salt in sodas. And a lot of people never think about that.
Mm-hmm.
So these are some of the things over time you learn. But I think finding those resources in the counties where that free education is can be of help.
And I would say that one of the um, important areas of information sharing that Cafe is continuing to share is making sure that this type of information is publicly available on
Yes.
our website
Hmm.
and using these video sessions to bring not just a virtual awareness,
Hmm.
but it's always going to be there to receive information
Hmm.
and to utilize the information that gives more exposure
Sure.
um, and pointers, just like you pointed out, that there are areas in each county that we can find these resources that are available to many who may not know that it's available,
Yeah,
and to
and even for, as far as medications, you know, if you go to a provider and you can't afford a certain medication, some of the companies can give you the medication free. Now, there's some paperwork that may be involved, but just bringing it up as part of the conversation to bring it to the forefront provider that, listen, I need to do a little more work here in trying to get them the medication because they can't afford it. So I'm saying that to say, if you cannot afford a medication that you need, there is the availability there, out there for you to have that medication from the company.
great. I wanted to ask, and this is coming from we and the cafe again, the cafe organization, um, the mission of mentoring and providing um, not just the general academics and the STEM program and the art and the music, but by seeing um, the professionals like yourself and others who can come back and make such a contribution in terms of the information sharing. As as a cardiologist now, what were your thoughts at, let's say, the age of some of our young cafe students about where you would be in the future, and how did you path this journey?
Yes, good question. So my path actually came out of curiosity. Because as a young person, I realized that as I looked at my family on my mother and father's side, I saw heart disease. And I
Okay.
was very curious as to why. One had heart disease and one side had really relatively healthy. And so that curiosity is what led me down this path to actually study that and be passionate about heart disease. And now it's partly genetics, but part of it too is how we are taught to eat,
Yes,
really. And you know, in the Caribbean, we have the whole gamut. And
correct.
sometimes we don't always eat what is good for us. We eat what tastes good.
Hmm.
And because we're foodies, no
Yes.
question. But that's what led me down this path, curiosity in a quest to find out why that difference. And certainly I have thoroughly enjoyed it. And that's why I'm so passionate now about taking care of people with heart disease. And my goal is to prevent untimely death from heart disease. because many of the risk factors that I talked about earlier, the high blood pressure, the diabetes, the cholesterol, the obesity, many of these can be reversed if we identify it early and be intentional about it. Some of this can be reversed because these can lead to other cardiovascular problems, whether it's a heart attack or stroke or other problems.
Many times I've heard, and I don't know it from a pedestrian um, uh, mind frame. Uh, a lot of people may not realize that their exposure or even their inclination um, to having a stroke can be uh, in their normal daily lives. And what are some of the, again, triggers that you think we should be aware of? And at what ages should we start taking this very seriously?
Yeah. Well, the risk factors or the predisposing factors for a stroke, one could be high blood pressure. I talked about that before. The other thing is that some people have irregular rhythms in their heart. And they just say in passing, oh, I have these irregular rhythms, or I may have palpitation, or I feel my heart skipping or jumping around, and not recognize, if left untreated, that can lead to a stroke because it can cause a clot to get up to your brain, and you end up shutting off the flow of blood and subsequent oxygen to your brain. So most people are aware that if they feel numbness in there, or severe headaches, numbness, any of these things, they know, well, I need to check it out. But sometimes not many take the whole palpitation and skipping in the heart seriously, or even bring it to the attention of others until later after they've had a stroke, and you look back, you realize they had an abnormal rhythm that led to them having a stroke.
So I wanted to, again, not overextend your generosity today.
Oh no, I'm enjoying this.
Wonderful. I'm so glad that we can actually share this conversation. As we anticipate what could become new normals,
Mhm.
um, where 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 do you see, and I know we talked about the practice and what is going to become change, and that change is going to be maybe longer than we would like to anticipate.
Mhm.
What would you envision that would be the or is there such a thing as a timeline that we get beyond this? How do
Mhm.
you anticipate
Mhm.
this to be?
That's a difficult question because I think the timeline, in a sense, may depend on the length of time it takes to get a vaccine. That's the timeline I think would cause people to be comfortable.
Yeah.
Uh, Now people are thinking about, now you can test antibodies, and so people are feeling a little more comfortable about that. But even as we look at the antibody testing, we see there's variety in terms of how accurate it is.
Hmm.
So what I would say is that there would be, for the next 6 months to at least a year, words that you will keep hearing are social distancing, need to wear a mask, being careful when you're in public, sanitizing your hands as much as possible. Those are going to go on for a while, I think, until we all feel comfortable that we could really get back to business as usual. And I quite frankly, I don't think we will ever get back to business as usual in terms of how it used to be, because I think some things may continue just because people may think, okay, if we relax, then we may have a relapse.
Yes.
And so, just for safety, some of these things may continue to.
What do we foresee then as the impact on our children's education?
That's very another very interesting question. And I was on a call earlier today where they were talking about uh, face mask. You know, using face mask. We use face mask in the medical field, but talking about face masks when children go back to school, because children, you know, they social distancing is hard for them. But if
Absolutely.
you had a face mask, then you could chit chat with your friends and be a little closer. But I think in terms of children, because it's so hard for them to do social distancing, I can see online learning, especially for the younger children, being in place for a while until they're safe. Because I think now that we know that children are not immune
Mm-hmm.
from COVID-19, we now have to be so careful because we've seen that the manifestation in kids is totally different from the adults. And it could be so deadly in children. It's making us all even more careful before we subject kids to this.
So potentially we may we may not see what would be the classic classroom um, environment for quite a while.
For a while. I would think, because even if they said it's safe to go back to school, the other part you have to think of the parents, because parents are overprotective, and then you have kids that have certain or may have diseases, certain autoimmune diseases, being treated for cancer, and the parent just wouldn't feel comfortable subjecting them to that environment just quite yet. So I can see it going on for a while. But even in that scenario, it makes it it enables us to be very creative and innovative in educating children, because I've seen some very, very innovative. I've seen a dance recital on Zoom. We've become very, very creative in terms
Mhm.
of things that we're able to do with the technology that's currently available.
I think we as humans in our continuity, um, as much as we're realizing that we have to adjust and uh, include technology. And one of the concepts of technology that keeps my curiosity going is I think the children have shown us before uh, we were had no choice but to find technology to work with. The children have shown us that they can use technology and become pretty much absorbed in it to the
Oh,
point sometimes that it's so extreme.
yeah.
So what I would like to think that the technology industry is going to be able to create is some type of synergy where children who are disposed to being very um, adept with technology, they understand the nuances much more so than we do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would hope and anticipate that the future of technology is going to be more accommodating for, using those same, I guess, triggers for kids that will keep them occupied. Would you say to uh, our audiences here that um, technology has, in fact, improved the communication, or do you think that technology is somehow inhibiting it?
I think technology has improved the communication because technology, like I said, has caused us to be very innovative. Things we thought we could not do. I mean, I've seen some birthday parties because you thought you could only have a birthday party with a lot of people in a house. I've seen some birthday parties with cars and with gifts, and it was just so beautiful. And the person enjoyed it just as much as if it were in the house. So I still think that this has caused us all to be very creative and innovative. And in terms of learning, uh, because one thing that I think it has done, it has helped brought out more discipline
Ah,
because it's one thing when the teacher is there, you have a set time, but when you are at home, there's a certain discipline that you have to know that although you are at home, it's school time and this is what I need to be doing. So it has enabled, brought out discipline in some people by them being at home, still being in school. In some cases, I saw one kid, although he was at school every single day, he had to put on the uniform every day. So that made the kid feel like they were in school because they put
mm-hmm.
on uniform just as if they were going out to school, although they were at home. And I thought that was a great idea.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So, I wanted to again re-echo to our audience that our platform, Cafe's platform, the Cultural Academy for Excellence, has really birthed many of our current graduates, and including on our board members, one of our younger graduates who has now become the secretary,
Mhm.
and her name is Tatiana Sindas. Um, and at this time in particular, one of Cafe's outreach efforts is to ensure that its community continues to be supported. And
Mhm.
that community in particular are those who may not have, one, the resources or the economic well-being to sustain their own customary lifestyles. So we at Cafe are hoping that through these um, sessions and videos, not only do we speak to how our expertise is so wide and diverse, but we invite our audience to know that you're making a contribution or you're helping others uh, by helping Cafe to be the continuing success that it is.
Sure, because I see cafe as a lifetime investment because as you invested these lives, like you said, they go on to be adults
That's correct.
and it's a cycle. And then they give back. So I think that's, like I said at the beginning, many of us are here or are able to do the things we do today because when we were younger, someone else invested in our lives. And I
Correct.
think by giving back, we are investing in future lives.
And on that note, I wanted to again just say thank you again for again affording us your time today, sharing with us so much information that uh, allows our audience to know that there are health um, incidents that they need to be aware of, and it may be in their daily lives
Sure,
that could impact their long-term health. And
sure,
more in particular, that you have brought such um, rich knowledge about the elements of what you would look at if you were to have a stroke, what women should be thinking about in terms of their own well-being,
hmm
how we should take care of our health.
hmm
So I again want to say thank you for allowing us to be exposed to this information, to sharing it with us, and for your continued contributions to the community, so which is so rich, more than we've talked about in this exercise. So, Dr. Hutchinson, thank you again on behalf of
sure.
CAFE for being our guest today.
It's been my pleasure.
And
And hopefully I can come back and talk about a whole new area, which is sleep.
Oh, definitely. I would specifically want to talk with you on that. I
Absolutely,
think there,
because people don't realize your sleep can affect your heart.
well, that would be a very, very vital conversation, and I would love to have us do that.
We can
Uh,
do that another time, I'm
by
sure.
all
That,
means,
absolutely, because I think if you poll most people, they're having difficulty sleeping, especially at this time. And I think it's important for them to know how that could be affecting other things.
that would be a wonderful, wonderful repeat for us to do. So
Right.
thank you so much.
Oh, it's been my pleasure.
And again, have a great day. I know you have other meetings to get to. So again, we honor and appreciate the time that you've taken with
Thank you.
us.
Thanks for having me.
You're most welcome. Thank
All
you
right.
again.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.